In this podcast episode, Konstantin Kisin delves into the complex and multifaceted challenges currently facing the United Kingdom. From immigration and cultural identity to economic struggles and freedom of speech, Kisin unpacks the underlying forces that contribute to the perception of Britain's decline, offering nuanced insights on each issue. Kisin initiates the conversation by addressing the ongoing protests in the UK against illegal immigration, emphasizing that while media coverage, especially from overseas, might exaggerate the situation, the core issues are very real. He explains that the term illegal immigrant itself is legally murky, highlighting that asylum seekers who arrive without prior permission and apply for asylum are technically not committing an illegal act. This legal nuance is pivotal in understanding why large numbers of people are entering the country and why protests have emerged, fueled by perceived gaps between law, policy, and enforcement. What complicates the immigration debate, according to Kisin, is the influence of the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, of which Britain was a founding member. This framework restricts rapid reforms and limits the government's ability to clamp down quickly on immigration flows. The protests represent not a downfall, but potentially a healthy signal that people are engaging and demanding reform, but only if the activism remains peaceful enough to avoid discreditation. The conversation explores how immigration shapes political consensus in Britain and elsewhere, particularly in the US, setting parallels between both countries. Kisin points out that America has a long-standing history of pro-immigration attitudes, but simultaneously harbors resentment against unauthorized crossings, highlighting the difference between welcoming legal immigrants and managing illegal entries. Britain, in contrast, is not traditionally a nation of immigrants, and recent decades have seen an unprecedented surge in immigration that has outpaced the country's historical norms. Kisin argues this rapid influx strains the social fabric and public services, noting how legal immigration numbers are now roughly equaled by the yearly count of unauthorized arrivals. The resulting pressure inflames community tensions, especially when migrant populations cluster in certain areas and cultural integration is insufficient. This dynamic creates fertile ground for political upheaval if people's concerns are left unaddressed, potentially destabilizing established political structures. A critical portion of the discussion focuses on the differences between multiculturalism and a multi-ethnic society, with Kisin cautioning that the former, defined by the coexistence of disparate cultural enclaves without integration, is inherently divisive. He laments the UK's retreat from a shared national identity, noting that British culture and values have become difficult to articulate publicly. Where multiculturalism encourages segregation along cultural or religious lines, Kisin argues a healthier society fosters unity through common values like fairness and respect, exemplified humorously but meaningfully by the British tradition of queuing. The UK's failure to compel cultural assimilation, especially through language and social norms, threatens social cohesion. Kisin underscores the unintended consequences of policy choices that celebrate cultural fragmentation, warning that without fostering a sense of belonging to Britain as a whole, disunity and resentment deepen, undermining the country's ability to collectively address broader issues. The economic dimension of Britain's challenges plays a significant role in the discussion. Kisin highlights that unlike America, where GDP per capita has grown since 2008, Britain's economic output per individual has stagnated or declined, creating a pervasive feeling of decline. Rising energy costs, government policies like net zero carbon targets, and an inefficient welfare system exacerbate economic malaise and public frustration. Kisin describes the UK's energy market as dysfunctional, with artificially high prices suppressing industrial activity and making it difficult for businesses to prosper. He articulates how economic hardship magnifies social tensions, since when prosperity is abundant, existing problems, such as immigration concerns, seem less consequential. But when wages stagnate and infrastructure deteriorates, grievances intensify, fueling political polarization and protest. The economic stagnation strips hope away from many, creating fertile ground for divisive narratives and political extremism on both ends of the spectrum. Linked closely to economic woes is the critique of Britain's welfare system, which Kisin describes as a trap rather than a safety net. He argues that social benefits, while essential for support, can incentivize dependency when poorly designed, creating situations where individuals have little motivation to improve their circumstances. This undercuts both the economy and social cohesion, as too large a segment of the population becomes disengaged from productive work. Kisin relates this to broader societal concerns, suggesting that unless reform addresses both economic incentives and social expectations, the UK risks entrenching an underclass for whom the state becomes the primary provider. The resulting welfare dynamics contribute to political frustration on both the left and right, complicating dialogue and reform efforts. The conversation delves into a pressing concern about the state of freedom of speech in Britain. Konstantin documents numerous instances where individuals have been arrested or prosecuted over social media posts deemed offensive or hateful, emphasizing that Britain lacks the constitutional protections found in the U.S.'s First Amendment. The increasing criminalization of speech, especially online, creates a chilling effect where ordinary people fear speaking openly. Kisin contrasts cases where popular figures are allowed to debate and respond to criticism with common citizens whose speech leads to police visits and lasting criminal records without trial. This imbalance fuels perceptions of a two-tier justice system. The oppressive atmosphere stifles honest political discourse and contributes to the sense that Britain's democracy is under strain, with expanding legislation locking down what can and cannot be said, and at times criminalizing ignorance rather than malice. Kisin offers a critical perspective on the evolution of media, particularly new media's role in shaping political discourse. While initially hopeful that new media platforms would foster more genuine, long-form discussions, he acknowledges the increasing tendency for content to cater to audience biases for clicks and monetization. This dynamic encourages sensationalism and entrenched echo chambers rather than open debate. He laments the rise of tribalism, where ideological purity often trumps nuanced truth-seeking on both the left and the right. And he stresses the importance of content creators who tolerate disagreement and rigorously test their views. Kisin advocates for media spaces that encourage intellectual honesty over audience capture, warning that failing to do so risks devolving into the kind of shallow, confrontational content that legacy media popularized. The discussion on immigration also touches on cultural incompatibility and crime, with Kisin pushing past politically correct platitudes to discuss uncomfortable realities. He cites data showing that crime rates, and particularly sexual offenses, in areas housing migrants have become a source of legitimate public concern. This assertion, he explains, is not an indictment of entire communities, but a recognition that cultural values differ and social integration has been insufficient. Kisin underscores that ignoring or dismissing these concerns in the name of avoiding racism accusations erodes trust in institutions and fuels grassroots anger, which can manifest in protests or worse. He advocates acknowledging and addressing these issues pragmatically to prevent them from metastasizing into broader societal fractures. One poignant theme is the debate over British identity and symbolism, exemplified through the controversy over flying the English or Union flags. Kisin explains that opposition to British symbols by some elements of society and officialdom reflects a broader ideological struggle where national pride is cast as racist or exclusionary. In response, the growing visibility of those flags is framed as a reclaiming of national identity and a refusal to apologize endlessly for Britain's complex history. This debate encapsulates a deeper yearning for cohesion and recognition that national pride does not equate to endorsing past wrongs, but to fostering unity in the present. Kisin sees these symbolic battles as microcosms of the larger cultural conflict and argues for a balanced, mature national conversation about history, identity, and pride. Kisin explores how Britain's historical reflections, especially post-World War II, continue to shape contemporary policies. The shadow of past mistakes, particularly regarding the Holocaust and colonialism, has fostered an ethos of expanded human rights and global responsibility. While noble in intent, this legacy contributes to bureaucratic and legal frameworks like the ECHR that complicate immigration control and national sovereignty. He contrasts Britain's approach with Germany's post-war guilt-driven openness to immigration, suggesting that some policy decisions are influenced less by current realities and more by inherited moral imperatives. This ongoing tension between historical guilt and present-day pragmatism complicates Britain's ability to formulate effective policies that balance compassion with national interests. Kisin discusses the psychological atmosphere in Britain, highlighting widespread feelings of despair, depression, and fatalism. Citing mental health statistics, he notes the UK ranks particularly low in well-being measures despite its wealth and global standing. This mindset contributes to a kind of collective inertia where people feel stuck in a region beta state, neither thriving nor hopeless enough to rebel. He contrasts British attitudes with American optimism, suggesting that Britain's combination of historical pride turned into self-criticism, economic stagnation, and political dysfunction creates a heavy cultural gravity that dampens ambition. Yet Kisin remains cautiously optimistic that acceleration of challenges might ultimately galvanize renewal, much like economic crises spurred revivals in the past. Despite the heavy themes, Kisin offers a hopeful vision grounded in the untapped potential of Britain's people and culture. He points to the country's historical achievements, intellectual capital, and creative talent as assets that could fuel a renaissance if harnessed properly. Achieving this requires a recalibration towards unity, practical reforms in immigration, welfare, and energy policy, and a revival of civic pride. He emphasizes the importance of peaceful activism, constructive political engagement, and honest conversations about British identity to overcome current divisions. By confronting reality without moral pretense and fostering shared values alongside reform, Britain might turn the pressures it faces into catalysts for a positive future rather than a narrative of downfall.